Okay, so that was amazing. What an introduction to what we've got planned today. And I will be nothing like that. And we will not be talking about things like that. So that is the context though. So what we just heard from Bruxelles is the context for everything that will be discussed. So you want to be thinking about this when I reveal and show you many things today. Like, wow, like, how does that mean? What does that mean to me? Like going deep, as Bruxelles was saying, going deep into what money means to you. So this one slide kind of sums up everything I've got to show you. Normal isn't coming back. A revolution is. A revolution is. But what kind of revolution? This is for you to contemplate. You want to dwell upon this as we go through all this material. Is it an outer revolution? Quite likely. How about an inner revolution? Do you think you need an inner revolution to go through what Bruxelles just said? Absolutely. Also, we have our friends remotely. Oh. So Zoom meetings, really, they're just like a modern day seance, right? Everything's magic. But no, we can't talk like that. So really, it's is somebody there? You want to join us? Hopefully you can hear us. So yeah, we've got our friends, as Bruxelles was saying, they are all over the world tuning in. Even some people locally, even some people in town, they're tuning in because as you can see, the room is maxed. So a big thank you for everybody tuning in and for showing up here today. You are our dear friends, most of you anyway, and those who aren't are dear friends of those who we invited. So you are welcome because this is a very private event with very private information, as you will come to see. So yes, I am Barnaby Anderson, and this is the future of currency that we will be discussing, especially in relation to DeFi and NFTs, which will of course blow your mind. Now, they say to tell you what you're going to tell them, and then tell them, and then tell you what you told them. So here's what's happening today. So we're going to start with the introduction, which is what we're doing right now. This is the introduction. So, has money gone psychedelic? Has money gone psychedelic? Well, I invite you to consider this throughout the whole day because really it's not going to make a lot of sense. Just an upfront warning. What I'm about to show you all day long isn't going to make a lot of sense unless you consider it from that context. Potentially, is it possible that money has gone psychedelic? Maybe people here have even experienced psychedelics. I don't know, you have to put your hand up, but if anybody has, to contemplate what that might mean for money itself, because if money took a trip, what would happen to the world? Interesting. Right? So now the next point, that after that, part two is going to be where on earth are we headed? We're going to discuss where we are going. Then what about all the money to rule the world? That's the third part. And these are going to be very in-depth, and I'm going to move at breakneck speed. Not the same way that Bruxelles talks. I have a very, very different style, and you at times may be like, can we just get Bruxelles back up because this guy is talking way too fast. Okay, but no, you've got me, and I talk at 2x. So then the fourth part is, can blockchain unlock freedom? I presume that most of us are looking for freedom in the world. Could it be that blockchain holds the keys for that? Then the fifth one is where you're really going to be getting excited. So all that other stuff in those first four parts, just the prep. But I do need to say all that, and you're not going to like it most of the time. But then we're going to move into show me the crypto. Yeah, show me the money. And so that's going to be the fifth part. And then the sixth one, well, that's even, now we're moving into, now the psychedelic trip has really taken hold. Because rebasing as a new kind of value-backed asset. What does that even mean? Wait till you find out. Then after that, NFTs, the new digital art, actually art as currency itself. Then into music NFTs, then the metaverse, and then how crypto exchanges connect to real world cash. I'll be showing you how to take that crypto and get yourself a taco. Interesting? Yes. And then risks and tech for keeps. So here we go into this first little introduction, where what we have there is Pandora. And yes, Pandora is opening the box. So get ready. You are Pandora and I am the box. So you are opening up the box. Oh, some little warnings up front. So there's absolutely no financial advice today. Make that very clear. Zero. Zip. Anybody who's thinking I'm giving you financial advice, you are insane. I am not giving you financial advice. That's the first point. Second point, 100% of this information is incomplete. 100% of it is incomplete. Everything I'm saying is incomplete. Even this sentence now is an incomplete sentence. So, the third thing is, everything shared today is out of date. So, it's out of date right now. Okay, so just so you're clear, we're living in the now, and what I just said is out of date. The fourth one, that I'm obviously Barnaby, and this is all my private opinion, point of view. You are actually stepping into my world. And so all I'm doing is, for some strange reason, I've invited all of you here today into my very private world. And my very private world, you may find, is somewhat curious and strange. But you're going to like it. The fifth one is, I don't expect you to agree with me. So do not sit there thinking, I need to say something to Barnaby. I'm disagreeing with him. No, I already know you're disagreeing with me. Okay, so that's cool. So you don't need to say anything. In fact, I'm going to be requesting that you all are quiet. You'll be quiet while I'm speaking because you come into my world. Okay, so that's what's happening. You'll be sitting there taking notes. Yeah, you can take notes if you want to. Meanwhile, as you can see, everything's being recorded. At the end of these sessions, as you saw, there were 11 of these sessions. If people, we may have the facility for people to hand in little notes of questions, or at the very end of the day, there'll be space for questions. But basically, I won't even be able to answer all of your questions, or probably even hardly any of them. Thankfully, everything I'm saying, given it's incomplete, there is extra information online. And other people are saying all of it way better than me. Can you believe it? So then after that, that this is also clearly just for entertainment purposes, and I'm here to entertain you, and you will be entertained. And so also I've often been very wrong. So remember, not only is it incomplete, but I've often been very, very wrong. But then I've also been very, very right. So what else have I? So what have I done? Why are you listening to me today, Barnaby Anderson? Well, I've been invited to go and speak at the at Harvard Business School on cryptocurrencies. I was invited to go and speak at Stanford University. I was invited to go and speak at the World Economic Forum in Davos, where I co-put on a crypto conference there, and Brussels was assisting remotely from Copenhagen in Thailand. So there I was in the Swiss Alps. And I've spoken at many, many tech conferences all over the world for about the last 20 or so years. So as you can see, I do have a bit of practice at this sort of thing. So my hourly rate, yes, I'm putting it here at $1,111 an hour, which hopefully would mean that none of you presumably could afford me. And it's not meant to be affordable. I am not affordable. Why am I not affordable? Because my time is spent on these lower activities, these things that you listed here, the band royalty that you heard Brussels mentioning, King of Quotes, the King of Quotes game, and Crypto 10X, of which you will be hearing scattered throughout the day. Now, yes, here's some proof. That's me. That's me in the Alps there talking at Davos. You see, that's us in Australia, because clearly I'm an Australian and Brussels is clearly a Mexican, and she came out to Australia when you were still allowed to do that, and thankfully we left Australia promptly afterwards. Otherwise, we wouldn't be here with you today. So, what else? That's me. We've also spent time living in the jungles over in basically, where was that? It's Shalak, south of Tulum, this most magical place there. And then you can see a very strange and curious photo that I took over in that part of the world. So, okay, why do you also want to hear me? What was that last little point I made before about sometimes I'm right? Well, I'd like to think of myself as a futurist, whatever a futurist happens to be. There would be somebody who apparently has some ability to see some sort of divination qualities. So, well, in '94, this is a very swift history from me that will give you insights into why you might want to listen to some of the things I have to say today. So essentially, in '94, I got my first laptop, and instantly I realized, I was 22 at the time, I realized that I would be able to go and live anywhere in the world. I was like, wow, with this laptop, I can go and live anywhere. I was living in Sydney, Australia, and very rapidly, Australia, even then, was becoming boring, which is really something. And so it was becoming boring back then, but I had this laptop, and I was working for a software engineer, and he began revealing to me things like CompuServe and various other networks. And I think because of that combination, I was like, well, one day I'll be able to go and live and work anywhere, on a beach, in India, whatever, Thailand, wherever I want to go, I can go do that. So then in 95, 1 year later, when I saw the World Wide Web for the first time, and I knew that it would change all of society. So there I was completely blown away. What actually happened was I was working in a computer hardware shop, actually, in Brisbane this time, and I went downstairs and I saw this magazine, and all over the TV, I didn't even have a TV, no, the press was this word internet. I didn't understand, what is this internet thing? So for anybody today who is struggling with some of these things I'm saying, which will no doubt be happening, please understand that I've been there so many times just like you, always getting stuck, scared, all of these issues with tech. And there I was in February of 95, just banging my head against the wall. What does this word internet mean? I went around, I'd asked people, nobody had a clue that I met. Like, can you imagine not knowing what the word internet even means? It was a strange time back then in 95. And so I went down to my lunch break and I picked up this magazine, and there was this ad in the back of it by this group that was called Firehorse. And they said, we design websites. I'm like, what the heck is a website? What is this web thing? We design them? And I called them up straight away on my lunch break. Hey guys, what's this whole web design thing? And they said, they're laughing away. You can hear them. You should come along to our talk tonight and we'll fill you in. And I was like, what? So I just, my wife back then, she was pregnant. So I just said, Hannah, I'm not coming home tonight. I'm just going to go to this talk. And so I went there and they talked all this gobbledygook, kind of like what I'm doing right now. Didn't understand much of it. And they had this ponytail and this long beard, and they looked super weedy, kind of scary, definitely sketchy, super thin, white, like kind of ghost-like. And I remember at the end and said, because I'm not a shy kind of guy, as you can see, I said, hey guys, I didn't really still understand this whole web thing. They said, don't worry, come back to our place tonight. And I said, wow. And so they said they lived in this sort of sketchy part of town, and I went there, and it was now midnight, and I was a little bit concerned about, was I going to make it home safe? And I got into their house, and I've never smoked anything in my whole life. So as I open the door, I'm coughing and spluttering already. It is thick and not with cigarette smoke. I'm just sort of peering through. And also, by the way, all I've ever done up until this point is meditate. And I spent the last 30 years doing a couple of hours every single day meditating. And there I was at 23, deep in my sort of meditative, contemplative self, and here I was surrounded by all these people where I couldn't even see them because the room was so thick with smoke. But I could see the glow of the computer, and I sort of made my way through, and this guy, his name was Tony, but we all called him Pony. Hey, Pony, come over here, buddy. And so I sat down beside him, and this weedy sort of character, and he said, look at this screen, and I'm going to show you this web thing. I'm like, what is this? He said, he just pressed some buttons, and he said, see ya? I said, yeah. And there was this screen with some text. He said, now anybody in the world can see that. I said, what do you mean? He said, anybody can see that. I just published it. I said, you can publish something, and anybody can check it out. I said, my brain just melted. And he said, and he pulled out a floppy disk, and he gave it to me. He said, you're going to train yourself in this thing called HTML, and then you're going to come back and you're going to make websites for me. And then we're going to make money together, Barnaby. And I was like, whoa, this is like blowing. I was so lit up. And then the guy he worked with, his name was Dorian, who was even stranger looking than he was. And Dorian took me into his room, and he sat down, and he had this incredible picture of this fire horse, because Tony was actually born in 66, which makes him a fire horse in Chinese astrology. So they were obsessed with the astrology of China. And there was this horse that was on fire on his screen. And Dorian said to me, Barnaby, see this image here, this digital image? In the future, these digital images will be worth so much money. Really? He said, what we're going to do is we're going to take these digital images and we're going to smash the original, so there'll only be a few copies of these, and they'll be worth a fortune. And I was like, man, what are you on? And I left the room staring out, and I went home to my home, and I said to my wife, who opened up the door, I said, you've got no idea what I've witnessed. My whole life is only about this. It's only about this one thing from that moment onwards. And so it was. And that's all I did. And so that was in 95. So that you could see in that one evening, it kind of crystallized everything that was going to happen to me, even to today. The next 30 years were predicated upon that evening. So sometimes we do have an event that happens that has a seismic shift in everything that we will be doing from that moment onwards. And who knows? Maybe today, maybe like that for you. Let's see. So then what happened after that? Well, in 98, I'm still going through this, in 98, I learned how the banking cartels of the world worked, and I was shocked by how finance was actually, how it had rigged the game. Because I've been raised by socialists who told me that money was evil, that we just had to be good, and now I had a small family and I was a businessman building websites and trying to figure out how money worked. And then I realized that the whole game was rigged, that everything in the whole world was run by this banking cartel, and the whole society was rigged like that. Then, a year later, I discovered digital currencies. In 1999, I started working 22 years ago with the first ever digital currencies, e-gold and various other ones, and I was literally trading digital currencies online. This is like so long ago, and it was not decentralized. There was the breakthroughs that have happened in the last couple of decades, they've changed so much. Back then, we were still trying to figure out how to use databases that we could share and having them on centralized servers. By 2001, I realized that Australia was essentially going to become a police state. I could see the writing was on the wall, and I knew I had to get out of there. But it was going to take me some time because my daughter, by now, she was already at school. And then I knew I had to start experimenting, so I started leaving Australia every year for 1 or 2 months, and I would go to India, where I'd like to go meditate and be in silence, to sort of calm down my mind, because it would sometimes go racing into all sorts of ways of thinking. And so then by 2008, all my international travels, and I met so many people, I started speaking internationally. I'd go on tours across the US and to various other countries, teaching people technology, because I had a knack for explaining the complex and making it simple. By 2010, I sold my IT company that I've been running for 15 years up until that point. And so basically, I kind of semi-retired at that point. By 2011, a year later, I started reviewing Bitcoin for the first time to understand, I did not get it. I did not understand it. It was one of those things, again, like, what is this Bitcoin thing? However, because everything was so good, I did not dive into it anywhere nearly as deeply as I should have. By 2012, I packed up my life, and I knew I had to get out of Australia literally before some event would happen. I didn't know what it was going to be, but I knew I had a few years left to go and travel the world. So I left, and since then, for the last 9 years, I've been traveling around the world non-stop. Well, actually, it did stop, didn't it? Like about 18 months ago. So up until then, I traveled everywhere, all throughout Asia, and Europe, and North America. And when I mean traveling, I essentially became a digital nomad. And I loved that life. I got my whole life down to 2 bags. My daughter, I waited till she finished school. On the day she finished school, I had my 2 bags, and I was literally out of there. See you, sweetheart, I'm going to go and travel the world. And so that's why because I figured everything out digitally, how to set up a life online, how to run everything from apps, it was like just the smoothest process. By 2016, I had a new mentor who explained to me how the whole future of everything was going to be digital currencies, and that Bitcoin and understanding crypto was where it was at. And that's when I formed Block Alchemy, which Bruxelles mentioned to you. By 2018, I was invited to go and speak at Davos at the World Economic Forum, because I wanted to go and discover really how things are operating. It wasn't enough for me anymore just to contemplate or hear reports. I wanted to go right up to the very heart of what was going on. And then by 2020, it was clear that these actually were the final days of the old world before the reset. So that should give you some context in my life, and maybe why it's good to pay attention to some of the things I have to say. A turning point for me, as you might have noticed back then, in 1998, was discovering what PT was. PT, the perpetual traveler. It also means permanent tourist, and many other things as well that we won't even go into. So essentially, this philosophy had a huge impact on my life, and you can't even probably find that book anymore, but it's a fascinating dive into everything about being a PT. But essentially, I can tell you what it boils down to, and remember, now we're starting to get into it. I'm starting to really let you in on some of my secrets. So these 3 aspects, to really boil it down into the very heart of what it means, is that where you live is not where you're from as a citizen, and where your money is held is neither of those places. So you basically split yourself into these 3 regions. You have your passport always with you, but you are not living there. Why wouldn't you want to live where your passport is from? Because there is no other jurisdiction that has as much power over you as where you originate from. So that is why I post-haste left Australia as quickly as I could. And then I set up my bank. The first thing I did was set my banking systems up not in Australia. I closed down all bank accounts in Australia. I made sure I had no property. I had zip, nada. Nothing was in Australia. I burnt it to the ground and left. I set up my banking systems internationally, and then I got myself to my 2 bags. So where was I living? Well, I was living out of Airbnbs, Uber, and my nice little 2 special backpacks that I had. And it was a brilliant life. And across all those travels, I made many amazing friends and met the beautiful Bruxelles and just had the wildest, bestest time. Only because I was down to 2 bags. If I hadn't cut myself down to I wouldn't have met Bruxelles, I wouldn't have got here, I wouldn't be talking to you now. It all came about because of my minimizing everything. And it came about by structuring things in these 3 ways. So just so you can also maybe not freak out too much, because as you're gathering, wow, there really might be some meat in what this guy has to say. There might be something here, and he's talking very quickly, and I can't take all the notes. As you can see, everything is being recorded. Here are the 11 steps here of what we're going to be going through, the 11 sections. And because you're all very, very special people, and on this private invitation, who I'm sure you might like a copy of this presentation, of which there are, many, many slides. And we'll be getting into that. So yes, you don't have to freak. However, it's not quite the same as listening to me as we go through the slides. And so that's why we're doing this recording. And so yes, if you wish to, we have a professional team who's going to be spending the next couple of weeks editing everything up into an amazing educational package, of which you will be welcome to purchase if you so chose. But what you'll have access to, because of your attendance, is the PDF of the slide deck. So hopefully that will put you at ease somewhat as you listen to me go through everything. Now, you'll also be hearing me go through, for the first few sections here, a number of quotes, because as you'll gather rather soon, I completely love quotes. And what we have here, because of the game that I co-designed with my business partner, Noble Dracon, who he's not able to be here, he happens to live further north. But together, we put together the King of Quotes game. And there are many, many famous people. There's 30 characters in this game. And one of them, of course, is George Orwell. And I thought this was most fitting to listen to what George would have to say at this sort of time. But one of the things he would say, if liberty means anything at all, it means the right to tell people what they do not want to hear. So maybe you might not like some of the things that I have to say, but I'm going to tell them to you anyway, because here you are invited into my little world. But it also might mean that many of these things I'm saying, maybe some of them might be offensive, but they're not even necessarily directed at you. Maybe this is here, you could take some of this into your own life. Like, is it okay for you to say things to other people that maybe they don't want to hear? So just contemplate everything I'm saying. Every quote is not necessarily directed at you, but maybe towards other people in your life, or maybe just a personal contemplation. So the Great Reset is upon us, my friends, whether we like it or not. Whether we like any of what I have to say or not, it is coming. What I'm showing you is just, according to me, I'm mostly wrong or often wrong, sometimes I'm right, according to me, this is what is going on. This is what is happening because it has been declared. And so what we're going to do in a moment, at this first little part of today, I'm going to be playing a few little videos, and this one I've got coming up in a moment. This is just a little warning. All this is going to be designed to push your buttons. So get ready to have your buttons pushed, and it is time, I request, that you let go of your old beliefs, especially around everything that Bruxelles was talking about. Everything that she was saying about money, etc. Let go of how you have felt and thought about it, especially about what you thought was possible. Because what we're going to be looking at today is definitely impossible and definitely is money on psychedelics. But so it's good to let go, but it's also good to understand what this Great Reset is all about. So I thought, who better to talk about the Great Reset than the people who are kind of putting it on, right? Our friends over at the World Economic Forum, headed up by, of course, Klaus Schwab.
We are wondering what is happening to the world. Everything is changing.
the very idea of human being some sort of natural concept is really going to change.
Our bodies will be so high-tech, we won't be able to really distinguish between what's natural and what's artificial.
Inside our own heads is the most complex arrangement of matter in the known universe.
You might ask yourself, can we get to be superhumans?
The original Industrial Revolution was driven by the discovery that you could use steam engines to do all kinds of interesting things.
But that was followed by additional revolutions for electricity and computers and communications technology. We're now in the early stages of the fourth industrial revolution, which is bringing together digital, physical, and biological systems.
One of the features of this fourth industrial revolution is that it doesn't change what we are doing, but it changes us.
With the ability to visualize brain activity, for example, through a simple consumer-based EEG device, it gives us access to ourselves in ways that we've never before thought possible. It unlocks the black box that is the brain and enables us to really, truly be able to realize an identity that is aspirational.
There's now a scientific foundation for the effects of mindfulness on the brain, on the genome, on biological aging. And when the human mind does know itself, then you get the potential for a new renaissance that restructures itself in terms of our relationship to life, our relationship to the planet, our relationship to work.
We need a different economic model. And by that I don't mean capitalism versus communism. What I'm talking about is a shift in the system along the lines of the two big changes that happened in the 20th century, Keynesianism, with a much greater focus on health and education and the role of government working with business, and then a reaction against that in late century to neoliberalism, where the focus was on free markets, freedom of the individual, and getting governments out of the way. We need a shift to a new system that will allow us to meet the basic needs of every human on the planet, that will live within planetary means, that will be fairer, and that will be focused as its key goal, not on growth per se, but on maximizing human well-being. And history tells us that a values shift is triggered by creation of a new story about how we want to live.
I see the circular economy as something which fits very closely with mankind's goal to be innovative and creative and to always progress. We can use asset tracking, we can use IT, we can use 3D printing to enable this different economic model to recover materials, feed them back into the economy and really to decouple growth from the resource constraints we have.
The reason we live in cities is not different today than it was 10,000 years ago. Even if we have got networks connecting us, we still want to have places where we meet in person. So this means the place where we work and the place where we live are much closer to each other, a city where we don't need to have big supply chains in order to produce things, where many things can be sourced locally thanks to 3D printing and robotics. So if we're able to do something to transform cities, to make them more efficient, then the impact can be huge.
Think about the prospect of getting rid of plastics. We must not only be inspired or informed by nature, but actually use natural organisms with which to design products and building parts. Only instead of varying material properties, we're varying biological functionality.
Design is critical today because it's the first signal of human intention. So the question of adding quality to quantity, it isn't a matter of simply circulating things that are potentially toxic. It's circulating things that are safe and healthy for all generations. So the goal is no longer, I want to be less bad, less monotonous, less unsafe, less unjust. It's really about a diverse, safe, healthy, and just world with clean air, clean water, clean soil, clean energy.
Together we are fighting to preserve our fragile climate from irreversible damage and devastation of unthinkable proportions.
If we think about the original Industrial Revolution, it was an energy revolution. I like to think of it as a kind of bookending of a period in human history during which we used fossil fuels, and it worked very well for us for a long time. But now we have to bring that to an end. We have energy technologies that can power our civilization: solar, wind, biomass. So then the question is, well, how do we get grid integration? Maybe the wind is blowing in Denmark, the sun is shining in Germany, and now you can move that electricity through an integrated grid. You can supply energy to everyone who needs it, and you can supply energy at all times.
Walking around, you do see different stuff as far as like the body marriage line. They use a lot of things that help them lift up and move things to the car. You just sit there and, you know, program something, and it has its own set mind to go ahead and do everything. And then as humans, we just come in and take the extra steps to help the technology.
It's not the cure-all for everything. There's definitely a lot of things where people perform the operation better, but certainly for the right applications, robotics are a huge improvement for the process.
The prediction of 5 million jobs lost by 2020 to technology is serious, but it's not the main question. Construction, manufacturing, services, public health and education, these industries will still exist. The main question is, what will be the future of work? How will we define work? How will we share the wealth?
From the viewpoint of the labor or jobs, now we really need new education or new training.
We're working with a World in Motion in FIRST Robotics, trying to encourage students from 3rd grade all the way up through the end of high school. We had students make sailboats, and then we had them race them, and so they could see how quickly they could move. And they immediately went back and started to say, oh, I saw what happened, I'm going to go change this or that. And that was 3rd graders.
I just given a prize to a kid of 18 years old that has discovered something really very, very unique. Came up with how to get better productivity and better yields for seeds of corn. And so he basically came with the idea that if you would perforate these seeds, you would get more food. And you think about it and say, but he didn't go to university. So how does he get all that knowledge? And he told me, I've been watching YouTube since the age of 12, and I'm so interested that I've seen everything about it. I've read everything about it. The world is really open to learning. The thing is, how do you give the incentive to your kids to do that?
It's this ability of digital technology to change outcomes, to truly empower people all over the world that can create a more equitable growth, because I think the world needs that.
Fourth industrial revolution has the potential to make inequalities visible and to make them less acceptable in the future, and hopefully to gather and garner political support to take the necessary decision to reduce the gap.
Humans have always been using tools, but because of the recent advances in technology, we're beginning to have machines that can augment us in all sorts of interesting ways.
I was the first person in the world to be able to voluntarily move my legs while stepping in a robot by exciting the nervous system using electrical stimulators directly onto the spine. We believe that a cure will be possible if enough of the right people have the will to fast-track a cure for paralysis.
We take two things from the patient. First, we take a 3-dimensional X-ray and we extract the 3-dimensional data out of that so we can make a perfectly shaped puzzle piece. And then we also take a sample of fat tissue from the patient so that we can extract the stem cells out of those. And we use those stem cells with this 3-dimensional scaffold that we fabricate, and after 3 weeks we have a piece of living bone that's ready for implantation.
Being able to use genome editing to understand the genetic changes that lead to cancer, and technologies like drug delivery, getting molecules into particular types of cells. There's a lot of excitement about being able to move much more quickly on this disease.
One of the things that I think is so essential to free and open societies is freedom of thought. And up until now, the conversation we've been having is around freedom of speech. Once we can access people's thoughts and access people's emotions, we have to create a space that enables people to think freely, to think divergent thoughts, to think creative thoughts. And in a society where people fear having those thoughts, the likelihood of being able to enjoy progress is significantly diminished.
We need to take responsibility at every level of society, from the individual and the personal to the institutional to the global, to adapt to these technological challenges and changes, which are redefining what it means to be human, what it means to work, what it means to be completely embedded in this world.
People always ask me if I'm an optimist or a pessimist. The technology exists, but how do we get it and implement it at the scale we need at a price that people around the world can afford?
Even though we have everyday problems we have to solve, we have to find a way to lay the foundations for the innovations of tomorrow.
Wow, eh? Well, I really hope you paid attention to some of those final things that were in that about we have the capabilities to observe human thought and feeling, and we're going to need to set up regions, zones, to enable freedom of thought. Did you catch that part? That was made in 2016. That's a 5-year-old video, prior to COVID. It's really interesting to contemplate. And I highly recommend that you go back and watch that again and just think about it all from a totally, like, they are super positive about it because, you know, they're making this brave new world. But did you ever hear them say they're making a brave new world for everyone? No. They talk about being integrated in the environment. They talk actually about just being integrated. Sometimes they just say, oh, we'll be fully integrated. Yeah. But they definitely leave out anything to do with who's actually in mind. Now, I also thought that that's a great quote to follow up from our game, King of Quotes, with Hannah Arendt. She's an amazing philosopher. There are no dangerous thoughts. Thinking itself is dangerous. You know, and Stalin is famously quoted as saying, we don't give our enemies guns. Why would we let them have ideas? You see? So I wonder why they might be wanting to have the maximum oversight. You think that we have oversight at the moment? Let's see what's in store for us.